That was so funny. You guys literally
Oh,
popped up
hey,
at the exact same time.
I just figured out my earbuds are working. Hey, don't tell Zoom, it's happening.
Welcome to Talk Like a Mother Parenting Autism Podcast. We are Jenn, Kim, Rachel, and Jaime. Take a seat at our table as we share with hope, humor, and honesty.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight we have an old friend of mine from my old daycare days, Maryellen. She is a ABA therapist, and she has an interesting story to tell. So she's going to talk to us. We're going to ask her questions about the ABA side of things and get some insight. Maryellen, do you want to introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Yes. So, hi, I'm Maryellen Rowell. I'm actually a board certified behavior analyst working in the field of ABA, and I have 3 kids. And I used to work with Kim. We used to work at a daycare together for a couple of years.
Yep.
Back in like 2001.
Once you have that
kids.
caregiver role, you keep that caregiver role.
Oh my gosh.
She actually had her first child the same year I had Kara. So we both left that daycare kind of around the same time, having a baby. We were trying to figure that out earlier. I was like, wait,
Yeah,
when
so
did you leave? When did I leave?
yeah, so you had Kara in May?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yep.
Jonah was June 23rd, so they were just a month apart.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
you had another one.
Yeah, Lexi, 2 years
Lexi.
later. She's still giving me a run for my money. So yeah, we were co-teachers in the same classroom. So Mary
Mhm.
Ellen came in, and she was like this little bippity boppy like Mary Poppins, like in comparison to the other people. So when she first started, we all just kind of looked at her and she was like very engaged with the children and she'd like sit down and sing them songs and like we were like, oh, this is not going to work. Like you are not going to get these kids this way. And she did. We had to give it a chance, and then she showed a little bit of a different way than what we were kind of used to there. But it was, because she was very nice and very sweet, and these kids are gonna eat her alive.
Yeah, I remember being surprised. I was like, you guys don't do circle time? I'm like, you don't sing? I don't know.
I know that we're a far space from the behavioral analyst twist, but I already know you're the type of therapist for my daughter. I just want you to know. Some sing song into these
Mhm.
trials. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
she came in with her like positive attitude, and we were like, "What is this?"
Shouldn't have been broken down yet.
no, I believe me, I broke down. There was a breakdown. I don't know if you remember, Kim, when I ran out of the room crying because I was just like, this is too much. The daycare world can be hard. I remember because I loved the toddlers. They were like so sweet and I just loved them. But I remember there was one day where I come in and in daycare, there's a lot of gossiping going on. I don't know if you were in there, but there just a lot of like gossiping and not really like watching the kids. And I remember like 5 of the kids like had poopy diapers and they were like all crying. And I wanted to take care of them, but I knew that couldn't take care of all of them. And I just started like crying and I ran out and I was like, this is not the job for me. If I stay here, I'm not going to want to have kids. And then that's when they moved me into, they were like, what can we do? What can we do to make you stay? And they moved me into like the older kids room. So I did like the after school program. I went and picked up the kids on the bus. But
There is a magic about that post potty training stage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But we were good together.
Oh my God, we did. Yes.
We had
Yeah.
it was a really big center and it was just a lot of bodies had to come in to take care of all the children. It was a corporate center and a lot of this was my first experience with daycare. So I obviously had children already. I already had Neil and Alyssa, but had never worked in daycare. And the same thing, they didn't do my co-teacher, she did circle time, but if she kind of did it when it's she'd be like, okay, come over here and sing some songs. There was no structure to kind of the way the room ran. And I just followed her lead because that's all I knew. And she left. And then when she left, I was the assistant. I was not a teacher. And they were like, do you think you can run the room? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I guess. And they're like, now the ratio is 4 toddlers to 1 teacher, not an assistant. And they're like,
Yes.
but there's 5 kids. Do you think you could have 5 kids instead of 4? And I was like, sure. Because we had 2 other toddler rooms down the other end of the building, and my kids would cry if they had to go down. So I would just keep them with me, you know, and I think they knew that I would do that because I'm not going to send them crying out of the room it was like those people, you know, and I just had a ton all the time. I had a different assistant all the time. They'd always come in. They never helped me because it like wasn't their classroom. So I did all the diapers. I did all the feeding. I did all the stuff and they would just kind of like just stood around. So yeah, I was happy when I finally got another co-teacher, but she was very different than what I was used to there. But I let her do her thing. She did her thing. She sang her songs and I was a little doubtful in the beginning, but
Oh
I was a
gosh.
little skeptical, but you know, the kids did come along. It was we had a good time. And then we
Yeah,
both
we
got
did.
pregnant at the same
Maryellen,
time.
we had to give Kim a spoonful of sugar too before she really liked us. She took a minute. She thought about it in just the same way. It's fine. Now
Oh
we're
my gosh.
thick as thieves.
So
I know.
you were telling me, which I did not know this. I mean, it makes sense because autism wasn't as prevalent all those years ago, but you were just telling me when we were messaging the other day that Alyssa was the first autistic child that you met.
Yeah. I remember you talking about, oh, my daughter has autism. I think it took you a little while to like tell me that. And so you were talking about her, she's autistic, but yet I really didn't I didn't know what I thought. I thought like Rayman, that's really all I knew. I did the Special Olympics, but mostly it was like Down syndrome kids and then special needs kid, but like I didn't really know autism at all. And I was like, your daughter will love me. All kids love me. And then I remember her coming in and just like we made eye contact briefly, and then she was just like off, like climbing, and then going up to her, and it was just like, no, she didn't even hear me. And I was like, whoa, okay,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is something different.
They had a thing of like people could bring their kids there, but I obviously couldn't bring her there. But I don't think even they, like the administration, fully understood. Like, it's like not one teacher in this whole school could handle this kid. Like one-on-one, never mind in the classroom, because she was intense then. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
And I remember she was just this beautiful, like gorgeous little girl, just so beautiful. And just like, what? Why? Like, why couldn't why can't I connect with these kids? And I remember just like, what? I wanted to like figure out how can I get into their world and connect with them. But Alyssa was just like off climbing and running away.
Oh yeah, sounds like I don't really even remember really, but it sounds
Yeah.
like her.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So,
me and Maryellen had our babies, and then we kind of lost touch for a long time. And then
yeah, we're
one time
busy.
she messaged me and said, "Hey, I'm going to looking to get in a job doing ABA. Will you give me
Oh
a
yeah, that's
reference?"
right.
And
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, sure, of course," which I thought was awesome. Anybody who's working in the field, I think, is obviously amazing. So
You're like, yes, bring your cousin, bring your friend. I'll give them recommendations too. We need all the therapists.
I'm surprised I
Oh
wasn't
my
like, come
gosh.
to my house and practice.
I know
Mm.
exactly.
It was a
I didn't know
biggie.
what I was
PhD.
doing. I responded to a Craigslist ad. It was like ABA therapist wanted. I'm like, what is this? And I was a stay-at-home mom for 14 years. My mom had been diagnosed with a glioblastoma when my kids were little. And like, it was like every year we didn't know if it was going to come back or what was going on with her. So it was a lot of just worrying about my mom, taking care of my kids. My husband had started a business, so I was just in it. But then eventually the kids started to, go to school full time, and I was like, what? I need to like get out and do something, but I don't think I can go back to that daycare stuff. And then I saw ABA therapist, and I'm like, okay, working with one child compared to like what we did, Kim, like
Yeah,
five toddlers to one person. I was like, okay, one child, that seems like I could do it. And so did they ever call you for a recommendation?
I don't remember.
Maybe. Okay, good.
I
I
think
don't
I
know.
think they did.
All right.
I think they
Because
sent
I
an
remember
email
being
maybe.
nervous because I was like, I haven't worked for so long. I did like volunteer stuff at like my church and stuff, but not like a real job. So I ended up getting that job, and it was with a 3-year-old boy in home. And I remember walking in, and the little 3-year-old boy just sitting at a table, and like he had all these programs and just following the programs, just like very structured, and just I was like, how did they do this? Like, how is he doing this? I've never seen like a three-year-old is usually like my 3-year-old's climbing all over things. And I was just like, this is some sort of magic. So I was kind of sucked in and I was just like, how do they do this? But my BCBA, who was supervising the case, was on maternity leave. So I only saw her, and I worked for that company for about 6 months. I maybe saw her 2 or 3 times. So
For
I
15
just
minutes.
dove into learning. It was crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just worked in the daycare. I was like, I don't know how to do this stuff.
So walk us through what this looked like. So you get the job.
Were you basically
So
RBT?
not yet. So
Oh, okay.
they actually told me that I had to complete this 40-hour training, and then I could maybe do this assessment and then take this test and then become an RBT. So I was very excited to do this. So I did the 40-hour training, which is like very old school, like discrete trial, like ABA, like do this, all that, which it's not really like that anymore. But so I did the training, and it said in the beginning, like, you want to pair with your child, you want to be like really kind of silly. And so I remember walking into the home and like having like a headband on with like, I don't know, little ears or something, and just like lots of toys.
I knew you were our kind of person.
So, but besides that 40-hour like video training, like the BCBA really gave me very little guidance. So I kind of just started learning on my own about this and incorporating like the play stuff that I did at the daycare with the kids and what I was watching my own 4-year-old like typical play doing. And this child wasn't doing it. So I'm kind of like putting in my daughter's play schemes where like, oh, this guy fell off the roof, and and then I found that he was like copying me and like just kind of elaborated on that. And so that was more of like a naturalistic play, which I knew that I loved and I knew that this little boy was thriving with. But he was the discrete trial, like the do this, do this, do this. And then with that actual company, I ended up getting another client who.
Can you explain what a discrete trial is, just for someone who maybe hasn't had experience with ABA?
Okay. Yeah, so a discrete trial would be like you have your SD, so you would say, do this, and then the child would have to do it, and then you praise them, give them their reinforcer, like in the old days, it was like, okay, here's a gummy. And then so because you added on that reinforcer, it's going to increase the future frequency of him doing it. And we might do a prompt first, because if you say do this and the child doesn't do it, we would do like a full physical at first if they were okay with that. And then you would clap their hands, and then they would know what it feels like, and then slowly fade that like to like a partial prompt. But on all those videos, it was like this, do this. So when I got that other client and I went to visit him at the daycare the first time, I'm starting off and I'm like, okay, we're going to do writing, do this. As soon as he heard do this, it was like all hell just like broke loose. He just went berserk. And I was like, whoa, this is trauma. I was like, I don't know if I want to get into this. So because of the little guidance that I had on that job, and I wanted to like get the assessment done so that I could take the test to become an RBT to get that.
So are you
I
just like
ended up,
basically just like a tech? Is that what the first level is?
yeah. So they usually call you a behavior therapist, and then when you become an RBT, that's like the certification that I think a lot of like the public schools are saying that you need to have now, so that it shows some like competency, like you know what you're doing. And that's with like our board. And then
So when was it?
Do you have a
When was
question?
this when you first started? What year was this?
So this was probably about 2017. So
Okay.
probably like 7 years ago. And I also stutter. So just in case you hear like my disfluency, I am a person that stutters. So, and that's probably why I kind of feel like I'm also connected to kids with autism, because I remember like stuttering as a child, being in complete blocks, or just like not stopping talking, and just not being able to like say what I want or I need, and so I feel like I kind of connected to kids with autism where like they know what they want, but they can't vocalize it, and they do it in different behaviors like tantrums and stuff like that. Not like I did that, but because they're not getting their needs met. And
But
so
you understood
I don't
the
know.
root.
Yeah, I'm dyslexic.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I
yeah.
really feel like I can understand my son because of that, because it's just the whole process of your brain wanting one thing and your body not, you're not doing that. It's not matching up. And so I feel like on that very small level, I can relate to that with my son and other autistic individuals. It's like they just can't, like you're saying, they can't truly express what they actually want. And it's hard.
I
Mhm.
think that plants this like ability within a person, because I feel the same way in my history of like learning disabilities or differences. I have this intuitive connection to what she needs because I've had those like, that panic right before it, like the skill falls away things. I mean, it just makes you creative in a different way to adapt to their
Mhm.
need. I think that's so great.
Or
Yeah,
it's
it
just
just
like you
gives you
kind of
insight.
know. Yeah, you kind of know what it's not like not to really fit in, or to be like some kids are bullied.
Yeah.
Maryellen, I know that like as I'm listening to you, I hear that you like see the ad in the paper, you make the call, you send out the things, you get this option to start right away, but then also you have this like level to upgrade with this 40-hour training, then a test out and whatever, like a increase or whatever. And the thing that you said to us is like, oh, this was so archaic, like it was such old skills for those 40 hours, but you don't know that. So then you get into the first job and you're like, hey, breaking hell loose. What did you say to him? Do it, or whatever the words were. And you like
Do
trigger town.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost as important for all of our kids to have someone who's trauma informed. And whether that comes from the School of Hard Knocks or another 40-hour course,
Mhm.
I feel like that's such a bridge to then you finding your own way. That's not this 40-hour class,
Mhm.
do it sort of thing,
Yeah.
So were you able
And
to
I'm
get
not the only
guidance
one. Yeah.
with the second kid? Were you able to get guidance to like,
Oh, you know what? That the owner of the daycare, once he flipped out, they thought it was something like she needs to go. Like it was something that I did that like hurt him or something, and they were like, no, we need to bring in the old lady who I was covering for, who was probably the one who was very, very strict and caused all that. I ended up going for like one more day, and it was like we were like cuddling and he was sitting on my lap and I was showing him like I like to find out what they love. So he loved dinosaurs. So I went through my kid stuff and I got dinosaurs. I got all the stuff that he loved. And we were connecting on that second day, but it was already like the owner had already called the mother and like, we don't want this girl. She's not a good
Yeah.
fit. And it was just
you're like,
because
I
of
have no
do this.
guidance.
Oh no, it was just those two words that set him off that just
Yeah.
ruined things. But
Well, it just triggered as
it triggered the trauma.
Yeah.
And now they're like our field is trauma informed. Like we go in now like assuming that there's trauma. And it was somebody recently that I heard say to have autism is to have things taken away from you.
Mm.
And it's like we were taking things away so that they could learn to ask for it.
Yeah. Well, you learn and you do better, you know better, you do better.
Yeah. And they don't know when they're going to get it back, if they're going to get it back.
It's
So
just
it's
a lack
hard.
of control those kids have that time. Like, what would it be like if people are constantly like teasing you with things? Basically, that's what it like taking everything away from you. You
Yeah.
feel like you have no control of their situation when you already feel like you don't have control because you can't communicate that,
Right. And which I love now is just like always giving choices. Choice is huge. And it's like parents can have some control. So it's called controlled choice. So it's like you're giving them the option, but yet they have some freedom to make a choice. So it doesn't feel
Blue
like they're
pants,
being
green
like,
pants.
yeah. So it's like, do you want the yellow cup or the red cup? Like, oh, okay.
So you said you lasted 6 months at this company,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
so did you go to a different company right away, or
So
what did
then
that
I
look?
ended up finding another company that did naturalistic teaching that had just started up in Norwell, so like a town away. So I applied for that and I got the job, but I got the job I was more watching the director's daughter. Like I wasn't even really with the kids with autism because my background was like the early childhood and the art, and everyone that had gotten into this field, like their backgrounds were psychology.
Mhm.
So I didn't do psychology. So they put me with the owner's daughter, and I remember doing like a little token board to get her, because it was a mix of like peer kids and then kids with autism. And I don't know. And I remember like feeling like they were talking about me, saying like, she doesn't have it. It's not gonna work. Because I wasn't like that, like type A, like structured, do this. I was more
Like
like, I
regimented?
was like cuddling the kids and like tickling them and playing with them, and like, oh, you don't want to do that? Okay, you don't have to. Yeah. So, or like, you're having a tantrum, or just gonna ignore it. Oh, that's really hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to do. So then I started to work for, yeah, for that company.
Did you eventually get to work with other clients and stuff?
Yeah, so eventually I talked to BCBA into like doing my competency assessment, and then I took that RBT test, and that was just like very reinforcing for me, like, wow, I passed this really hard test. This is the kind of a hard test with like a lot of hard new material, and like, okay, I think I was like 40. I was like, okay, I can learn things in my old age. So I ended up, I was exposed to more BCBAs, and these BCAs were like these rare creatures that like you never get to see. But in this company, there was like one in each room. And so I saw what they were doing. I'm on the floor working with the kids, doing what they tell me to do. So it's like the BCBAs are the ones that make the plans, but the RBTs are the ones on the floor doing the hard work. But I couldn't really do anything that they weren't telling me to do. So it was like, okay, maybe I want to get into that role. I think I can maybe be a BCBA. So then applied for my master's, my bachelor, my GPA was not good enough to even get into the program that I wanted to, because I was not a good student. I was really not good. But
And
I
what did,
found this
was it,
program.
yeah, because you did art, graphic design or something, was that?
Yeah, I
What did
did
you,
that. So I got that for my bachelor's, but I got my associate's degree in like early childhood.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then the bachelor's I got in art and graphic design, because I was thinking like, okay, daycare, I can't do the kid stuff. But then, yeah, so I found a master's program that allowed you to kind of go in and take the first couple courses. If you do good, then you can get in. So you can prove yourself that you can get in. So I ended up getting all A's and then a 4.0. And I was like, this is actually something that, because I also had a learning disability as well. And like I didn't learn like typical kids. Like I still actually can't spell, but like the program for a master was designed by behavior analysts that know learning. They know how kids learn. And so it was just like that. You learn a little bit and then they constantly test you. It's a lot of quizzing, it's a lot of building on top. And I actually got a 4.0 on the whole thing. And I ended up taking this
Amazing.
really hard test. So the BCBA exam, there's only a 60% pass rate. I ended up passing on the first time. So it was pretty
Yeah,
amazing.
that's awesome.
And then there's different things. There's not just that discrete tile, there's the naturalistic teaching. And so now I'm a BCBA and I can design the programs.
I was
Child
on
should.
mute, but I gave you a hallelujah at 4.0 as I'm
Oh,
huffing it up the steps
oh
from my
my
daughter.
gosh.
And I just love that you found your calling. Are you
I
kidding
know,
me?
me
A
too.
first pass, and then you're
I
like
know.
sing song, arts and hugs and kisses get to build the programs now. Oh my
Yeah.
God. I love that. You know, Mary Ellen, I'm not sure if you're picking up what we're laying down, but we as moms feel that those BCBAs have been an elusive beast in our lives too. Like
Oh,
15 minutes of time with my daughter doesn't necessarily help you to build a plan to help
mhm,
somebody make her tick in a different way. You know, it's
mhm.
like it's very difficult to connect when the bridge is built by someone who knows the least about what's going on 3 months in, you
Yeah,
know?
you're right.
So we're like, yeah, we knew it, Mary Ellen.
Mm,
You're like RBT position and the one before that are just these like untrained people in the dark. And unless it's your calling, and we can tell as moms when someone's in the right role, like,
mhm.
man, it is
Yeah.
tough stuff.
We've only done ABA through one center. That they did some in home and we did some in center. And we've had, and within our time when we were there, which was about 3 years, I want to say, Lady, correct me if you remember. But we went through 3 BCBAs and a lot of
yeah.
RBTs. We had one RBT that was amazing, and the BCBA that was matched with her, we loved him. And he would come in our home at least once a week with her, which was great, and stay and like really work through things. And he was very communicative with us. He asked for our input as parents. He would always be like, okay, what do you guys want to work on? Which they all asked, but not all of them would like actually work on
Mhm.
them.
Adjust their sales. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's like finding someone who's actually passionate about it and like really wants to work with you and with your kid. And I'm sure maybe you'll talk about this too, but just, you know, the caseload for some of the BCBAs too seemed like a ton. And that's, we ended up leaving ABA. Overall, our time I think was done with it, but just the last BCBA, I was like, I don't even know if she remembers who we are, or, you know, it's just, it seems like she was just such in the grind that we weren't getting a lot. And then if the RBT wasn't great, you know, that's when the actual application
The whole
was
thing
happening
breaks
to
down.
matching. So,
Yeah.
but I think it's amazing that you had such passion for it. And I bet that's what got you in that program, is because they need good people who want to do
Mhm.
it and work with our kids.
But you're
Oh,
right. There
it
is
was
a
maybe
burnout rate.
also, it could have maybe been her 4.0, or the fact that she's in like God's plan. It could have been that.
Oh my God. Crazy. But I did start to work in the field, and when I became a BCBA, and you have those RBTs, and at first you're passionate and you want to train them to work with these kids the way that you did or you had, and I'm on the floor and I'm training them, but then they do just like quit, or I don't know, or they're just, you leave them all week and they're not doing it exactly the way, and you're just watching the data, and it's hard.
Yep.
It is
And I
hard.
think for parents, you know, for
Oh
our
my gosh,
kids,
yes.
routine and consistency is so
Yeah.
key. And the turnover is so high in this field where it's so important to
Mhm.
not have that. I always just find it remarkable that they cannot hold staff
I know.
in these positions for our kids that so desperately need that consistency of a therapist. Because I don't even really think it's the therapy per se over the therapist, because we've had two drastic different ABA experiences. And I think it all really kind of came down to the people. Like you
Yes,
said,
right.
like you get right in there at the kids and
It's
connect
the
with the kids.
relationships. I think the
You know?
relationships are what's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's hard when it's that constant turnover.
it's crazy. And I
Yeah.
know I would walk into my parents and I would be like, I have to tell you something. And they're like, no, she's not leaving. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just can't. It's so hard to tell them that no. Well, yeah, because the kids do get attached. And then you have to tell them that the RBT is leaving. And it's hard.
We spent a lot of time in centers, because at least then, as the
Mhm.
turnover was happening, they had been rotating therapists through more than like one that's assigned to our home. But as I think I said, when we first got on, Maryellen, I live in Minnesota, and it's super interesting right now. The state is passing, or has passed, this level of therapy called EIDDI. Basically, it says that you can implement modalities similar to ABA and other therapies like in conjunction, without being a BCBA or having that license above the therapy. And I think it's, or the therapy can be there, but you don't need an RBT to follow through on it.
Okay.
So they build this plan, and we have then what's called like a skills worker. So they come in and they basically, as a mom who's been with my daughter in ABA, like I can see all the trials and the connection and the build little skills on top of each other kind of traits
Yeah.
of ABA. But it's so interesting how it's governed, who governs it, that so much has to do with the business and the way that they build their caseloads and the kids that they service and the kids that they won't, you know?
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and
I
then
think as long as you're watching and you can see what's going on, that's important.
Yes.
we have an ABA story. So Alyssa got ABA. So she was diagnosed at 2.3, and they were like, she needs to get ABA until she get into school. She couldn't go into school until she was 3. I said, okay. They said this is the only therapy, the only known thing that can work for autism, that can help with autism. And we got it through the May Institute. And it turns out that, in fact, that Alyssa was the first child in Massachusetts to get early intervention to pay for her ABA services. She was the first.
Wow, Kim.
Yeah, right. So I found
Wow.
that out like 4 years ago. So I'm like,
That's
that's kind of
crazy.
crazy. But we did not have a great experience at ABA, because we had this lady come in. Her name was Tracy. She was young, and she came in and she took Alyssa, and she was very by the book.
Mhm.
Alyssa's just not a by the book kid. It was pretty much like 3 hours of screaming. She got
Oh.
3 hours, 3 days a week. So she screamed for 3 hours, then it kind of went down to 2, then it went down to an hour and a half. But when the
Mhm.
BCBA came, which I had no idea about any of these terms or what any of this
Mhm.
meant, but there was a lady who was a supervisor who came, I don't know if she came like once a month or once every few weeks. She came every so often, and Alyssa responded awesome to her. She did so good any of the times that she was there. And in my head, I'm like, why can't this lady be the one to come? I didn't like know the ins and outs of it. Like there was really nothing known at that
Yeah.
time. This is, you're talking like 1998 at this point. It was play based though. She was down on the floor with her doing things, but like, getting her to look, getting her to put things in, and she just resisted every step of the way. And it was just so hard. But comes down that I found out later that this lady or girl, she was pretty young, Alyssa was her first client. So she was so fresh off the boat that she just like went completely by the book. I know with ABA principles, you obviously have to be structured and all that, but like she didn't do the thing to connect with her. So like Alyssa did not give anything to do anything. The only thing this lady had is that Alyssa loved bubbles. So it's like that's the only way that she kind of got through to her. I mean, I think it did help her be a little more successful in school, because I think if she didn't have that and went into the school, it would have been a lot rougher of a transition for her. And at her school at the time, because ABA wasn't as like available in the schools, they did like ABA principles, they called it, in her preschool classrooms. They did the discrete trials and stuff like that, but they didn't have like ABA. So she, kind of got like the outskirts of it. Obviously those things work very well, but I feel like for Alyssa, like she's even now is so prompt dependent. And it's like so hard to even try to break her of these prompts, even today in her 20s. It's
You gotta fade them quickly when they become prompt dependent. Yeah, it's hard.
like she got to the point where she wouldn't eat at school. They had a prompter for every single bite.
Oh no, okay.
Oh,
Yeah, which she didn't do at home. So I was like, you
Hmm.
have to prompt her to eat. Like you'll have to be like, okay, go ahead, eat, and then she'll
Yeah.
eat all her food. But at school, she'd take a bite and then she'd put it down, and she would like, and that this is like high school and this started, and they were like really trying to like, break her of the prompts and like kind of figure it out. But like it just happens without you even like really like
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that prompt dependency. I never even heard of that until she was like older. Do you know what I mean? So
And we're still learning a lot about things that are going on, ways that things work better. And like our field is it's pretty young. It's a young field. So it's constantly changing and adapting, and we're learning new things, but that's hard.
so you went to this new center. Got your BCBA. Was at the new center. That was a center
Mhm.
base, not home base.
It was
Is that
center, and then I ended up doing EI home,
okay?
young kids in home. And then I did have older kids that sometimes I would go like the Boys and Girls Club or different places like community things. So yeah, I did that for 2 years. And then I don't know, very into like signs. Like I just kept like getting signs like, okay, you need to just like go off on your own. Like you need to do this. And it's like the Mayflower just kept like coming out, like all these signs. I was like, okay, so maybe if I do my own thing, it could be called Mayflower. Yeah. So thinking like, okay, I feel so bad telling these parents that their therapists are leaving. And I like doing both. I like doing the planning, but I also like being on the floor with the kids. And then if I'm the BCBA and I'm on the floor and I see that something needs to change, I can change it right away instead of like waiting for the next week for the BCBA to come in. So that would be faster progress if I'm doing both of these things, and maybe just take like not that many kids and then train the parents so that when I'm not there, they can be building these skills and reinforcing these skills and stuff. So that's when I decided to go on my own. The whole business thing was like a curveball, like learning credentialing and starting a business, but I started it, and I have 3 clients right now, and I'm doing both. I'm RBT and I'm BCBA, and it's just like when things pop up, like my little client today was like came home and he started talking about, he said cool kids are sometimes mean. And so we were like thinking, me and the mom, like, okay, some sort of bullying thing. So right there, I'm like, okay, we're gonna go into a bullying. What do you do when you start to be bullied? And we did a role play. Okay, when somebody says, "Oh, your shirt is ugly," whatever, we're gonna say, "Whatever." They want a reaction from you, so we're just gonna. So we went into like a social skills thing, and
I love that
so
you get to pivot because you see it.
Yes,
yes,
I love that. Like that's like
Yes.
you hear stories about that. Like as a parent, you find someone who found like we call them like the golden ticket BCBA that acts as a RBT and a BCBA. Like I've come across a few people talking about that. I live in Colorado and ABA centers here are like everywhere. It's like
oh,
a
they're
hot
okay.
business. And so it's really rare to find like a BCBA that's outside of those programs because I mean I'm sure there's a lot of security and not having to take care of all the business stuff. Like you were saying, that's really hard. But like every once in a while, someone will be like, "Oh, I found this BCBA that comes in our home," and they're the one working with the kids because you want someone that can just pivot like that. Like
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
is a problem that happened. You guys
So
saw it right
nice.
away. You could immediately jump on it and like
Hmm.
give him tools. Like I love that so much.
Yeah,
And
but
just
I
the
didn't
way
even
that
know.
Maryellen is talking about a parents, she's like, and then I'll school the parents and then they'll be able to. I'm like, oh God, be still my heart. Like, are you
Yeah.
kidding?
We're
Well, I
required
love
here
that.
in Denver for your insurance to cover it. You have to have parent training or else
Oh
insurance will not
Yeah,
yes.
but
cover
that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that the therapist is invested in you
That's true.
learning, like Mary Ellen's little voice was. She's like,
Mm.
and then I teach the parents. Oh, I
So
love you.
how did you get the nerve or the confidence to make that jump between like being at a center? How long were you there for?
Oh my, I was there for 2 years.
Oh,
Kim, a
okay.
lot of anxiety, a lot of imposter syndrome. Like what?
Mm-hmm.
Like I am not good enough to do this. I can't do
The
it. A
Mayflower
lot of
had to come pick her
anxiety.
up.
And I'm still doing it and
Yeah.
I'm still nervous and I'm still like, oh my goodness. Oh, well, we had a really
So
bad day last week. It was bad. And then and a great day today. So it's like up and down.
do you have like an office? Do you do it out of your house? What do you?
So right now I have one client in my office that comes in that they live like probably 30 minutes away. So they come to so I have a choice. And then I do in-home. But it was like when I started, probably it's been maybe 6 months now. I didn't even know if insurance was going to pay for this model. Like I wrote my first treatment plan because it's not the typical model. Usually it's like the BCBA does the treatment plan and then the RBT does the work. But like Blue Cross would actually approve this. And I was like, whoa. And then they proved it again.
Whoa.
So they're going with it. So thankfully, but it's
Great.
not the typical model. But this really kind of should be the model. Like speech therapists and
Do you
OTs, like
travel to
they
homes
work.
in Minnesota?
Oh, that would be a little far.
It's so
But
It's
cool,
your
Mary Ellen.
travel rate.
I
Yeah,
know.
we'll go virtual. It's fine. We can be flexible.
But it's
Well,
so
and then
It's
obviously,
fun.
interesting. I wish you could write your business plan and share it with the world because it just sounds like you have so many components dialed into the dream and having your location is extraordinary. But again, Colorado, BC, Minnesota, all of our
but
listeners everywhere.
if you were to grow, you might have to alter your model a little bit
I
because
would, yeah.
you wouldn't be able to do both for, if you get so many
I
clients.
know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All I'm looking for
You'd
is a
have to.
teacher right now. So if there's any listeners in
I know.
DC,
I
looking for a
know.
teacher, that's all we need right now.
Mary Ellen, can you speak a little bit on like there's a lot of discord about ABA currently. A lot of autistic adults are coming out and saying that it was damaging for them. And so a lot more parents are hesitant to do it. It's also, I feel like for all of us, it's the only treatment that we're told at diagnosis to get to our
Mhm.
kids. Do you have advice for like parents who are hesitant about it? I know the first thing when my son was like 2 and ABA was first brought up to us, it was like they introduced us a very strict, like your son needs to be there 40 hours a week. If
Mhm.
he misses more than like 90 or sorry, 10%, he had to be there 90% of the time, then they might pull him from the program. Eventually we found the center that we ended up with that was much more manageable and realistic for a real life. But can you help any parents out there that might be trepidatious about getting into ABA and what it's really about and what it's really like?
Mhm. Yeah, well, it is like the gold standard right now when a child is diagnosed with autism to start them in ABA like as soon as possible because insurance pays for it and we have the data that it's working, that kids are actually learning. But they recommend it is between like 20 and 40 hours, which I think is way too much. And like science is proving now that you really don't need to have that much, especially when you're doing like the parent training and the parents can like continue things. And even there, like I've even heard about like burnout, like kids
Yep.
need naps so that they can absorb all the stuff that they learned during that time. And to have somebody there all the time, it's like not as meaningful, where if it's a shorter time, you can kind of like really focus on certain things and the kids are like awake and not like phased out by it just being going on so
I mean,
much.
I really think that comes from like, that's how centers will run, right? Because they run almost like
Yeah,
a lot of AB centers run like a daycare center. So then the
they
kids are
do.
there
Which
8 hours a
I did work
day
in
and
the
then,
center. I do actually like the center. So the center that I worked at, they had kids come in from like 9 to 12 or 9 to 3, and it
Yep.
was run like a daycare. And the progress there was huge, was really, really huge. So I think if you can get your child into a center-based program, especially because they would be facilitating in interactions between peers, which is really important
Mhm, mhm.
because we want the kids to copy the peers because that's when they take off. Like in school, they'll watch a child going down a slide and they'll copy. And kids with autism don't like naturally copy
Yep.
things.
They
So
don't
it
make
kind of needs to really be taught at first, but then once they're taught, it generalizes to, I'm going to copy this kid and copy that kid. And oh, I can learn this and that. They can learn so much through the kids.
I'll
But
say for us too. So we started in the center, and that was great because it was my son wasn't in school yet. It really prepared him for
good.
kindergarten and school.
Mhm.
Like being in a center, they even though they can't technically teach them, they kind of set it up the day like it would be at school to help him eventually make that transition, which is what I really liked about ABA, was always thinking ahead. Like, how are we going to like transition them out of this? How are we going to get them here, but like meet them where they're at now? And that was great for us. And then once my son, it was kindergarten, first grade, then we moved to in-home because then we needed more help with life skills. And
Yes.
that was really nice, was having them in the home because he was getting the socialization at school now, but having someone after school to like work on, like we worked on like brushing teeth and washing hands,
Mm-hmm.
closing doors, like just any little thing that came up. So like for parents out there, like it's what works for you at the time, what you need. But we loved in center. It really helped us a lot.
Mm-hmm. But the in-home is so important too, because it's like those are like those independent living skills, like the going to the bathroom, like the getting dressed, the brushing the teeth, things that they're
Mhm.
going to need forever,
Yep.
especially like the bathrooms, because you don't want like somebody having to help your child in the bathroom.
Mhm.
And you want
Mhm.
you want your child to do it all by themselves so they'll feel safe and you know. So we really
Yeah.
break those things down. We teach one step at a time. We teach with pictures. We reinforce each step. Like, and yeah, that's really important for like the older kids too, where they don't need to be learning match colors. Like they need to be learning how to get themselves dressed, how to prepare a meal, so that they can eventually kind of be on their own and be self-sufficient and not need the support, because that's the whole goal of this. Like we want independence. We want to fade ourselves out of a job.
Well, and I learned so much from having in home as well. Like I can actually, I mean, this was 2 years ago. I can still hear our RBT, who we love. She was a really great, she was training to be a BCBA, but I can still hear her, the things she would say to my son. So she would leave. And then it was so much easier for me to implement those things because I
Mhm.
was there with her while she was doing it all day. So it really teaches the parents how to implement the things the kids are learning in ABA.
Yeah, exactly. Because you do it more than we do. You're there in the morning, you're there at night. Yeah.
Literally the best advice a therapist, my daughter's speech therapist did, nonetheless, she said, if you have to put the work in, we can only do so much as a therapist, and you have to put the work in at home because you spend most of the time with her. So
Mm.
it's actually on you, that's on you to do that work at home. And that really stayed with me.
That's the parent part. And it's exhausting sometimes. It's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Well, and it's hard too because I'm my little doe-eyed ABA therapist, and she'd be like, "You just have to tell her no, and you just can't allow this, and you just have to do this." And I'm like, "You can barely handle her for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Like, try doing this
Yeah.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week." Like, and Alyssa used to react to the word no the way your child reacted to do this. Like, you couldn't say the
Okay.
word, or she would go
Yes.
completely off the chart. So we'd have to try to find clever ways to say no without saying no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it
Yes.
would be a whole meltdown you know, she didn't
Yeah,
like that
we
word.
have
She still actually doesn't really love that word unless she's saying it. She likes to say it, but she'll like you to say it to her.
I have a lot of
Listen,
good words. Not available. It's not an option right now because I've had kids that when they hear no, it's
Mhm.
just like,
we're
Yeah, it
getting
just
away with
triggered her.
nuh-uh. Hear
Yeah,
me.
that's what we
uh-uh.
used to do. Uh-uh.
Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh.
Yeah.
Maryellen, do you know anything about like the history of ABA? Because you hear a lot of autistic adults talk about ABA, and it sounds to me completely different than what my son had. Like my
Mhm.
son, it was so play-based, especially in the center. When I was at home, it was really like working through his preferred activities. Do you know, did it used to be way different? Like even for you, Kimmy, when Alyssa was
Yeah.
younger, was it more demanding? Was it less
I mean,
like
she was so
reward?
little. She was only 2 when she had it. So
Yeah.
hers was play based. And I don't know if that was like a time where they were like kind of developing that, but I
Mhm.
really think it's a thing of reward and I don't want to say punishment based, but like sort of like you can't have this unless you do this. Like
Right.
it's just that whole, you know, we saw the video of one of our, you
Yeah,
know,
we
when they
had
were
a
like
friend who took a video, and I will say that scared me, even though we were the
they like
RBT was being demanding.
it was like
Yeah.
he had to do this to take a bite of whatever the snack was. He didn't
Right.
do it, so she took the food out of the child's mouth, and he was like 3, like
Okay.
not that long ago, like 2
Oh,
maybe.
cringe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've
So
never
I
had
think
experience like that. So
I was like
they were in a
watching to soothe.
they weren't here. It was a different state. So like, but I think a lot of it was very much like that, where it was just almost like you kind of were forcing them into it, kind of like it was like
Mm.
you you have to
It
do
was a
this
strong arm, not a skill
in
builder.
order to
Yeah.
get this, which I think that's just what they kind of knew back then. But
Yeah.
Alyssa's was like that, but not like that. Like it was like, oh, if you stick these little things in this thing, then we'll blow bubbles. So it wasn't like, granted, if she didn't do the thing, they didn't blow the bubbles, and then she would just throw herself back and scream for like a half an hour. So she
Bubbles.
kind of like,
Yeah, which is not good. That's not good. ABA. She's screaming for hours and hours. Yeah. Yeah, it
yeah. So
was
they kind
kind
of
of
try to,
like that.
yeah, they kind of try to break them, so to speak.
Yeah, they
You know what I mean?
break
Just
them. That's what it was. It was kind of like breaking them until they comply. So it was like compliance. But now now we do compassion over compliance. Like
Oh,
it has
sweet
changed
Jesus.
completely. So probably way back then, the kids that got it, maybe they were learning, but it was like they were learning because they were forced into learning it.
Yep.
And I have heard those, I have read on those, on Instagram and stuff, and it's the kids that are adults saying this, it's torture, it's all this and that. And you know what they do actually in Canton in Massachusetts, they still do shock, which I've heard a
Oh,
lot of like speaking
kidding.
out about the shock, which is it's disturbing, and they have to go to court and they have to get permission in order to do the shock. And I think it is something just very light, but this is for the severe kids where it's like they're gouging out their eyeballs, they're disemboweling themselves. Like,
Mm.
so, I mean, I learned about it in my master's, and my professor, who was very, very compassionate, he was kind of for like a little bit of a shock if it was going to stop them for a second from disemboweling themselves or some severe behaviors. But I mean, there's other ways besides that now. There's different ways. So I think that's like the only place where they still kind of do shock, which I have
Oh,
yeah.
gone to a conference and they have the protesters outside with the speakers. And then
I mean, like
inside, like,
whenever people talk about that, I'm like, that has not been our experience. I mean, if my son was being treated badly or anything, like our center was always open outside of like some of the COVID time to parents being there, and you could see what's going on. And I'm like,
oh
I
yeah.
just don't like this nice little RBT. I just don't see them like
Yeah,
screaming.
no.
It's like
I
the thing
don't think people
saying,
saw it though at that time, because like maybe your kid's attacking you and everyone in your house, and this is stopping it.
Yeah.
Maybe this is
Mhm.
stopping your child from running out in the middle of the street. So it's like,
Yeah.
Listen,
if they need a little bit of,
I'm
I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm saying if they need a little bit of that like strictness in order to like keep everybody around them safe, I don't think parents were allowing people to treat their children badly. I think this is what the therapy
well, I
model
don't think the
was.
parents knew. And I think parenting was probably a lot different back then too, where now
Yeah.
with parenting overall, there's been this big movement towards like gentle parenting and
But
compassionate.
I think back then the ABA was just very almost like cold. Like this is
Yeah.
how we do it. this is the way it's got to be done. Even if you kind of felt bad, you just kind of were like, nope, nope, this is, you have to do this before you do this. There was like no leverage, no leeway. It was just, that's it.
Mm.
Well,
And
again,
then,
as parents, that's the only thing you're told will help your child too. So
No,
I
it's so
feel like
terrifying.
parents.
well, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, like people like to talk about, seclusion rooms and stuff. Like even saying it, my throat tightens a little.
Mm.
But I have the kind of kid that goes to a special school that frequents the seclusion room because it is the safest place for her. She moves from one break space to another and it escalates to that level. And it's like, if you're continuing to melt down and be unsafe and it's going to affect more and more people and the adults are getting tired out, there's a time and a place for even the stuff that makes her uncomfortable. So I get like you have one retina left and we're trying to do this thing, like extenuating circumstances, but it certainly isn't happening at your local ABA centers as maybe it once was. I mean, that's
Yeah, well, I think now it's like Maryellen was saying, like now it's like encouraged to make a connection with the child. Where before it
yeah.
Right.
almost like
compassion.
wasn't encouraged necessarily because then you're gonna kind of like veer from like protocol. Like I remember, I just won't forget this lady. Like she was so like, and Alyssa was not the one. She was not gonna conform. Like it wasn't gonna happen. But like this is what you're being told. They'll get them to talk. They'll get them potty trained. They'll get them to stop hurting people. Like you're kind of like. I remember me and Neil's mother, we would just like kind of look at each other and okay, it wasn't like she screamed the whole entire 3 hours. It would be on and off, obviously, but like I'd be like, I'm gonna go get her. And she's like, no, no, no. And then she'd be like, I'm gonna go get her. And I'm like, no, 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 because she was just a stubborn little witch. Like she was. Like she was not gonna do anything that she really didn't want to do. So by the time Alyssa came around to her, she had just decided that she was actually going to do it, but she didn't have a relationship with her. So like,
Okay, yeah.
and it wasn't like she wasn't mean or cold or anything. I don't mean that, but she just wasn't like, she was like, okay, Alyssa, this is what we're going to do. I want to say she used the word, it's time to work. I think that was like the phrase they used.
Okay.
And it would be all toys. It's not like she was being like, having to do these horrible things. It would be like putting the shape in the shapes order, but like she didn't want to do it. So like, and it would just be like a repetitive loop of just like trying to get her to do it. And
Yeah.
and obviously back then they worked on the eye contact and like the weight, all that stuff. But like she was just so stubborn and she was so little. I mean, she was only 2.5 when so thank God it was only 3 hours, 3 times, because 40 hours of that would have pushed me over the edge. But I just don't think I think she was so new though, which we didn't know. She was so new that like she didn't know, like sometimes you gotta go and make that little connection to
Or
get
that's
them
how she was
to
trained. And I think a lot of
right.
the ones that are coming in from psychology, some of them like never have even worked with children before. Like they
Yeah,
don't
it's like
even
the
know,
data
like twinkle,
approach.
twinkle, little star. But now it's
And look
like
at
so
you,
safe.
they literally throw you in with the wolves. Like you don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then these poor parents thinking they're getting, these trained people. Like
Yeah.
it's
But that
just
was like, I mean, 7 years ago, our field has changed so much.
mhm,
So it's like
mhm.
now it's like if a child is into like a little like string. So it's like they have one little string that they like to shake. We might add in like another color string, or we might like tie it together, or I don't know, we'll just go off of like what they want, or we'll do counting with them, or lights if they're into lights. We'll use different colored lights, or oh, you want this light? All right, do you want it to blink fast or slow? Or like we just use like we
Flexible.
start from where they are and just like teach from a place of joy. We give them all the stuff that they love. So
Yeah, and that's
it's
so much more
different.
motivating for
Oh
anybody.
yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you're gonna get a lot further, I think, that way than just nope, this, then this, like,
Yeah.
Mary
So
Ellen, for parents that are listening and they are not in the Mayflower zone, what would you tell us? Like, is there a sort of, I don't know, a bit of information that you feel would go a long way for people? Because I feel like nobody knows the scope of what to ask for. Nobody knows how hard to push. Nobody knows if ABA is the right or wrong thing because they had one good or bad therapist. Like there's so much, it feels like, on the line. Is there something
Yeah.
that you wish parents knew?
Well, I'm starting to see a lot of parents chiming into like when somebody is bashing it or something, like the parents like jump in and they just defend because they have experience. So you need to like meet who's going to be working with your child, meet the BCBA first and just see how you feel. I think it's got to be like a gut feeling. Like when you see them with your child, like you just kind of know, like, okay, this feels right in my body. It feels like this could be a good fit. Ask like what they're like, the way that they teach, what type of teaching is it, like naturalistic? I think that's the best way to go. There's pivotal response. PRT is another great way. There's this brand new, well, it's not brand new, it's been around for a while, but it's just becoming super popular. It's skills-based. So practical functional assessment, skills-based treatment. So this is a compassionate approach where they teach from a place of joy. So it's not like we're going to find out the function. Is it like escape? Is it attention? We're assuming all functions and we're starting with the give. So we're giving that child everything that they love, all their stuffed animals, all the food they like. So they're sitting there with their iPad and all this and that, and they have your attention. So they have attention. They have
Alyssa would
everything.
like to sign up.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like,
So
oh yeah,
it's
that
so
works for all of
great.
us.
And then it's like, so we'll slowly kind of just be like, okay, we're going to be all done with your stuff now. And then it's like, we prompt them to say like, my way, or no, not right now. And then we say, oh, okay. We honor them. And then they just go back to what they want. So it's like, we're teaching them that they're in control, that all they have to do is use their words. Their words have power, and they can get back to all the awesome stuff that they love. And then it's like, we'll sometimes add in, no, I'm sorry. Right now, you can't go back to your way. So we're teaching them like to tolerate, like no sometimes. And then to tolerate, like, okay, you're going to put your iPad in here for a little bit, and then we're going to start to work. And then if they want to go back to their way after like a little bit of work, we'd say, oh yeah, sure, you can go back. So it's just like we're slowly shaping it a little bit more at work. But it's like what they're finding with this is that it just builds such a strong, trusting relationship between the child and the therapist, that it's like the child, when the therapist said, okay, we're going to work on this now, or we're going to work on brushing our teeth, or that, the child is all in, like, I want to be with this person because this person is kind of like, they trust them so much. And so
plus that
When you
takes
start
the
at a
power
level-
out of the iPad and the stuffies and all the preferred things. Like it just,
And just starting them with this level of almost like relaxation instead of like,
yeah, they call it
taking it
happy,
away.
relaxed, and engaged.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
What's
it's like,
hilarious
we
is-
don't.
That becomes such a power struggle too, right? Between the child and the therapist, and then there is no trust there. So it's just always this
Exactly.
constant.
And I feel that's a little bit like kind of how our therapy was when they did need to ask questions and work on skills. Sometimes they would do it while he was playing. So,
Okay.
I mean, I don't know all the technical names, but they would be like asking him, like, how do you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something, like
Yes.
sequence, I guess, stuff. And so while he was playing with his toys, he could just say it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that also worked really well too, because then he wasn't like, okay, stop everything you're doing. Now look at
Right.
me, or, whatever. Like it was just like, okay, he's got this. It's in there. It's just
Right.
not going to come out when you're demanding it, until you slowly build up to that. Like, okay, now let's try sitting and saying it. And I
And
think
that's also pairing questions with like a really good thing. So it's like you have to do housework, which is kind of adversive, but yet you have your favorite music going on, Taylor Swift or whatever. So it's like, that's, it makes it equals it out.
I need that.
Yeah.
Do
What
housework.
was that other style you mentioned? Pivot? What did you say?
Okay, so the one with the starting from the place of joy is called skills-based treatment. So practical functional assessment, skills-based treatment. So it starts actually with an interview with the parents. So it's like we're actually not even observing the child. It happens really quickly. So it's like we're talking to the parents, like asking the parents who know them best, like, what does your child love? Like, what is their favorite toys? And we want to give them all the stuff that the parents tell us.
that sounds
then
like
there
this
was-
EIDBI too, which I did look up. I want to let you know, just to
Okay.
loop back. It stands for Early Intensive Developmental and Behavioral Intervention. And so
Okay.
I think as compared to other acronyms, therapies, or like billable to insurance, it's like more broad, so that it can come from this place of rapport and skills, and like it's based on the relationship.
Okay.
All of the people that have done it for us are more like your skills therapy or the positive reinforcement therapy.
Okay, good. Well, we know that the more relationships, the better relationship that our kids have the better the outcomes. So that's good.
Yeah, so it's just evolving, which is great, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Maryellen, do you have a website?
Mayflower Early ABA Services. I do have a website. I started off just thinking I was just going to do like private pay, I don't know, helping parents and coaching them, but that really didn't take off. I didn't really get any clients at all. So then I was just like, okay, maybe the insurance model is the way to go. So I now do
Thank
insurance,
goodness
but I
for
also,
Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts.
oh my goodness, they are so good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm trying Harvard next, which I've been working with them. They keep me on hold a lot. Like I was on with them for like an hour. This whole like business side is definitely a learning curve, but
There's such a demand though. Like that's all I see on any of the autism pages is like, oh, we're on a wait
yeah,
list, we're on a wait list, we're on a wait list.
right.
People can't get into ABA. They
Well,
can't
that's
get
why I started it. Like I heard like, okay, there's a wait list all over the place. So maybe this little like getting things started instead of waiting a year is really going to help a lot of parents, but
yeah. Well, thank
I'm
you for
proud of
coming
you.
on. It was so great to see you. And it's always interesting to hear the therapist side of things.
Thank you so
Thank you for joining us.
well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I
Thank
love
you,
your
everyone.
podcast. You guys are doing a wonderful service. You're making parents feel like they're not alone, and that is huge.
Thank you.
Huge.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Talk Like a Mother Parenting Autism podcast. If you are enjoying our podcast, make sure to rate and review us wherever you listen. And if you'd like to support us, you can become a subscriber. Just check out the description of this episode. Give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram for more content, and we'll see you next time.